it comes to a topic that's been going on in the blogosphere now for a while, and that is there seems to be this idea, and it's not just in England, and it's worldwide, and that idea is this: if you're an American, you probably don't know what you're talking about when it comes to soccer, and there's a lot of proof of that on the blogosphere, obviously. But B, I think there's a lot of still this sort of carryover arrogance that maybe this team, this is just a fluke, and we're really not that good. Cliche response from the outside world to American soccer.
It's funny for me because I've lived here now, obviously over 10 years, and I've been around some tremendous people within the footballing world in America who know just as much as their counterparts in European football. So I think there's always going to be that kind of face put upon American soccer just because there's so many other sports here in America. Right. They're always going to look upon, well, Americans really don't put soccer as the number one sport, so how can we take them seriously? But what I don't think they realize is the people that do put soccer as the number one sport here in America really put the work in, and the Americans do it right. They have the best facilities. They have a great coaching system. They have a great, I've gone through the coaching system here. I've got my A license through it. So, I think they're doing a discredit to the American soccer system when they do talk down to us like that. And, I think sometimes it almost makes you want to beat them more. You have this mentality, you get together like a bunker mentality. We know what they think of us. Let's prove them wrong. And I think that's something that Bob Bradley needs to use to his advantage when they're playing against these bigger European sides. And I think he has done that.
Mm-hmm. How many Americans have to play in the Premier League before we get a little respect?
It's funny because no matter how many people play there, I think it's always going to be the same. I think the one position we might get, and I say we for America because I have lived here for so long, right, and I am cheering them on in the World Cup. But the one position we seem to get the most respect in is goalkeeper.
That's right.
And even at that, they say, well, it's because they have other sports where you use your hands a lot. No, it's quite simply that these goalkeepers have worked hard throughout their whole career, mm-hmm, and are just very well trained and very well versed in being goalkeepers at the top level. Yeah. And I think we saw Landon go over there this year and absolutely roast Ashley Cole when he played against Chelsea. So we're talking about a player who plays in MLS and going to the Premier League and proving that he can play at the top level. And I think there is other players like that here in America. And the academy system over the next few years, which is being built up now within MLS, I think that's going to give us even more and more players from these shores going over to not just the Premier League, but La Liga and Serie A too.
Yeah, I hope so.
I certainly hope so, yeah.
I was going to, now I'm kind of circle back to the Slovenia game coming up. And one of the things that, and maybe one of the only concerns that Brett and I had and other people have had, well, first of all, the first goal that Gerard had was clearly a missed assignment by Rico Clark. And there are a lot of people out there saying, okay, we're past the first round, and I think most of us thought Maurice Adu would start because he seems like a stronger defensive player and maybe even a better possession player. But now we're getting into a game against Slovenia. Do we start Rico Clark again, or is it time for us to go with even a Torres or a Maurice Adu instead of Clark?
For me, I think you start Clark again. I do think he was at fault for the goal. I think Clark can be reckless at times. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
He reminds me a little bit of Paul Ince when he played for England, in the sense that Paul Ince was a player who relied on getting tackles in, but he went forward too and tended to leave gaps in behind. Mm-hmm. And I think Ricardo Clark is that kind of player. But for me, after that, he played probably one of his most disciplined performances for the US. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very difficult to look at a group of players in the eye and talk about the performance against England and then try drop one of them for the next game. So I do think Clark should start, and I do think it should be the same mindset going into the Slovenia game. If you get wrapped up in, okay, all of a sudden we need to add more attacking players to our lineup, you concede a goal, and then all of a sudden things start to change. So I think you've played well a certain way in your first game. I think you can build on that going into the second. And of course, you have the likes of Torres and Holden on the bench who, if needs be, can come in and make an impact. Edson Buddle too, I would include in that group. But for me, I would certainly go with the same lineup and reward them for what was a great performance against England.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you think Bob Bradley's going to play Michael Bradley the same way that he played him in against England? Whereas it seemed like he almost was a tamer Michael Bradley than we were used to seeing. You know, he wasn't marking anybody. He was taking away the passing lanes. He forced England out wide.
And, you know, from Clark to Bradley, I thought it was one of Bradley's best performances in an American jersey too, because my problem sometimes with the American midfield is who's doing what. They tend to go forward together and leave gaps, and then they defend. There's no set roles, and I thought Bradley decided early on in that game, this is what I'm going to do. Obviously, you know, his dad worked on it in training, but Michael sat in front of the back four. As you said, he cut out those passing lanes, and, you know, he sacrificed a little bit of his game that we know he likes to do, which is get forward into the box late. But by doing that, he made the US a stronger defensive unit. I don't think it's any coincidence that, you know, Demerit and Gooch played very well. You know, one of the reasons they played so well is because Bradley was playing so well in front of them. Now, if Bradley all of a sudden decides to start going forward and changing his game against Slovenia, I think you'll see gaps created in the back. For me, you know, I'd like to see Bradley play the same way. Give yourself a nice core base to build off, and I think the US will score goals.
Well, I hope you're right. And speaking of scoring goals, then I guess what you're saying is we're going to stick with Finley, and we're not going to go with Buttle.
You know, if there was one change, it would be Finley for me. But I think his work rate was tremendous. You know, I think he's deserving of the start. He's got pace, and pace is such a commodity in the modern game. I think he does trouble back fours. I think Altidore, you know, we saw his confidence grow as the game went along. I mean, the one run he had on Carragher.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he made Carragher look really silly. And Jamie Carragher's a player who's played in the Premier League for the last, you know, 12, 13 years and won the Champions League and, you know, was brought out of retirement by Fabio Capello for this World Cup. So that is only going to bring the confidence levels of Josie Altidore as high as they've ever been in a US jersey. So I think he and Finley for now, but I think we will see Buttle sooner rather than later in this tournament. And I think Buttle and Altidore are two players who would give defenses problems. And I do think they are two players that can play together.
Yeah, we didn't get to see Gomez at all either. And I think some of us were hoping to, because here's a guy who just can't stop scoring.
Kind of player, you know, if given any amount of time, he's a penalty box striker. And I think Bob Bradley's looking at the bigger picture, the international game. It's not just about having someone out there who can score goals. There is the work rate. You know, we talked about Finley with the pace to close down defenders, to make it more difficult for other teams to play. But certainly when teams are tiring, the last person you want to see coming on if you're a defender is Herculez Gomez, because you know if he gets that one chance, more than likely he's going to put it away. And funnily enough, you think back to his MLS days when, you know, coach after coach played him right midfield or out of position.
Absolutely.
You know, I think Herculez Gomez, there's a lot of coaches in this league right now looking and saying, I might have made a mistake with him. And, you know, I've judged him in the past and said he wasn't good enough. I think he's proved me wrong too. And, you know, credit Gomez. And I think, you know, Gomez is another player we will see in this tournament. And, you know, I've no doubt that if he gets a chance or two, he'll certainly put them away.
Well, I think everybody underrated Gomez simply because you know, Kansas City and Colorado both played him out of position, playing him on the wings, whereas when he was with LA, he played up top, and now that he's playing down in Mexico, he's playing up top. I think that's where, obviously, he's supposed to be. So I don't think anybody really rated him that high until he went to Mexico and started doing well.
Yeah.
You know, I thoroughly agree, Brett. And the funny thing is, Herculez, having talked with him on a couple of occasions and done some interviews with him, he is a great kid.
Yeah.
And he's not the kind of person that's going to turn around and say, look, I'm not a wide player, I'm a center forward. Sometimes you want that from your forward. You want them to have that selfish streak where they want to play down the middle. But, you know, Herculez was a kid that wanted to play. And he was told, you're going to play out wide. He said, okay, that's what I'll do if that's what the team needs. And he did what the team needs, but he basically sacrificed his own strengths. And, you know, it took him to go down to Mexico and prove us all wrong, really.
Yeah.